Good morning and greetings to parents, students, and friends. My name is Tiffany Alexander, and I welcome you to the closing ceremony of the 2021 Tigers Roar Summer Journalism Institute. For the past weeks, students have learned from professional journalists and educators. Here to tell you more are two of our Institute students, Ms. Ariel Webb from Covington, Georgia, and Ms. Katarina Geisler from Lisbon, Portugal.
Greetings and thank you for joining us as we close out the 2021 Tigers Roar Summer Journalism Institute. I am Ariel. I am 14 years old from Covington, Georgia.
And I'm Katarina. I'm 17 years old from Lisbon, Portugal.
In the past week, we've learned everything about careers in media, from journalism to public relations to crisis communication.
We found subjects to interview, we wrote and broadcast stories. We even handled a mock school emergency.
We look forward to sharing with you some of the projects that we completed.
And thank you again for joining us.
Thank you, Ariel, and thank you, Katarina. Next up, we have the interim chair of the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication at Savannah State University, Dr. Juliana Trammell.
Greetings and welcome on behalf of the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication. It is with great joy that I welcome all of you, our Savannah State University family, parents, friends, students from the United States, Portugal, and Brazil. Today, we are celebrating the conclusion of our program. We hope that you enjoyed it as much as we enjoyed putting together this program for you. We spent 7 days listening to seasoned professionals in the industry, giving you an early jump start in your career in the field. To our dear campers, we hope that in the past 7 days, we instilled in you the passion for journalism and mass communications. We also like to extend an invitation to you, campers, to visit our beautiful campus one day. Thanks to all of you. A special thanks to the leadership team, the faculty, staff, our consultants, the dean and provost at Savannah State University for all the hard work, support to make this a successful program. Now we have greetings from the dean of the College of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences, followed by the provost of academic affairs at Savannah State University.
Greetings, students and invited guests. I am Dr. Shantae Baker Martin, Interim Dean of the College of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences. On behalf of the entire college, I want to extend my sincere appreciation and congratulations to you for participating in our inaugural virtual journalism camp. I do hope that you enjoyed your experience learning from our amazing faculty, staff, and professional consultants. Though the program ends today, I do hope that you continue to explore and develop your enthusiasm and interest in capturing and sharing stories. And when you finish high school, I look forward to welcoming each of you as official SSU Tigers. Thank you, parents, for entrusting your students to us. And to our special guests, thank you for imparting your knowledge and wisdom into these students. Again, congratulations to you all, and I do hope to see you again. Thank you.
Good morning, Summer Institute members. It is my honor to greet you this morning. I am Symmetria McFall, Interim Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs here at Savannah State University, and I bring you greetings on behalf of the Division of Academic Affairs. I hope the past 7 days have been extremely meaningful for you and have helped you to develop your skills and your talents as a budding journalist. We are so pleased that you wanted to join the program this summer. It was completely virtual. I hope you enjoyed that experience as well. It allowed this to become an international program, as I understand that we have students from Brazil who have been participating as well. And so again, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to the ceremony on today. And again, I hope that you had a wonderful learning experience with our professionals in the Department of Journalism and Mass Communications here at Savannah Savannah State University. I offer special thanks to the planners of the event and the department chair, Dr. Juliana Trammell. I know you've had a tremendous experience. They have all been extremely excited in the planning and preparation to have you here. And so I thank each and every one of you for your involvement in ensuring an exceptional learning experience for our budding journalists. So again, welcome, and I hope you enjoy the program this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Trammell. During the Institute, our students reported and wrote several stories. They range from the upcoming Olympic Games to social justice issues to how the COVID-19 vaccine affects their generation. Please join us now for the Tiger Roar News Updates.
Hi, I'm Sari Rath, and I'm reporting for Tigers Roar Summer Journalism Institute. Representation matters, and this year, young black and brown gymnasts, swimmers, and runners will get the opportunity to dream of their future selves competing in the Summer Olympic Games. Widely considered the best gymnast of all time, Simone Biles won a record 7th U.S. title this summer, and she took home the gold in 2016 at Rio, and is poised to become the first woman to win back-to-back Olympic championships in more than 50 years. 5 years ago, Simone Manuel became the first black woman to win an individual gold medal in Olympic swimming. On the final night of Olympic trials, Simone Manuel shocked the crowd and herself by winning the 50-meter freestyle. On track, Olympic newcomer Sha'Carri Richardson says she's that girl. She's also the fastest woman in America and represent USA in the 100-meter dash. Richardson, who ran track and field at Louisiana State University, is a favorite to bring home a gold. The Summer Games kick off on Friday, July 23, 2021. This is Sari Rath reporting.
Hello, my name is Elena Jackson with the Tigers Roar Summer Journalism Institute. The country has a new holiday. On June 17th, Joe Biden signed the Juneteenth Independence Day Act into law, making it the nation's 12th legal public holiday. Juneteenth, also known as Jubilee Day and Black Independence Day, commemorates the emancipation of enslaved African Americans. It's been celebrated annually on June 19th in African American communities since 1865. Around the country, communities celebrated with parades, festivals, cookouts, and remembrances. Juneteenth National Independence Day is the first new federal holiday since Martin Luther King Day was established. I'm Elena Jackson with your Juneteenth special.
Thank you, Elena. This is Alasia Gahagan. After more than a year of quarantining, social distancing, and mask wearing, the world is beginning to open back up. Most of the country's public schools are expected to fully reopen in the fall. A COVID-19 vaccine for those under 18 was first approved in December, when the U.S. Food and Drug Administration and the U.S. Centers for Disease Control authorized its use in those 16 and older. This summer, the vaccine was deemed safe for those ages 12 to 15. The CDC recommends that everyone 12 years and older should get vaccinated to help protect against the virus. According to the CDC, about 45% of Americans eligible for the vaccine are fully vaccinated. This has been Sari Rath, Elena Jackson, and Alasia Gahagan with the Tigers Roar Summer Journalism Institute. Thanks for watching and tune in next time.
Miss Alexander?
Here I am. Our students did a wonderful job on their news update. We are so proud of them. To revisit that broadcast and to see some of the other reporting our students did, please visit our website, tigersroar.com/summer_institute. Again, that website, tigersroar.com/summer_institute. We'll now ask Dr. Trammell to come back and introduce our keynote speaker, Mr. Jesse J Holland.
Thank you, Ms. Alexander. It is with great honor that I present to you today's speaker, Jesse J Holland. He's the host of the Saturday edition of C-SPAN's Washington Journal. He also appears on CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News. He has been a great inspiration to our generation. In my early career in Washington, D.C., on the Capitol Hill, working for an advocacy organization, I was inspired by the work that he was doing at the Associated Press, where he was a long-time race and ethnicity reporter, where he covered the White House, the Supreme Court, and Congress, all three branches of government. For those of us who also call Mississippi home one way or the other, I know I do, he's an esteemed son. We're so proud of him. Jesse Holland is an award-winning journalist and the author of the first novel featuring comics' most popular Black superhero, the Black Panther. He's also the author of the award-winning book, The Invisibles, African-American Slavery Inside the White House, and Black Men Built the Capitol, Discovering African-American History in and around Washington, D.C. I'm not even going to touch 1/3 of his accomplishments. You had to read his bio. He's the first in so many things. Without further ado, it is my honor to present to you a dear friend, Jesse J Holland.
Thank you, Dr. Trammell. I really appreciate that great invitation. And congratulations to all of you students for completing the virtual journalism workshop. I hope that all of you have enjoyed yourself and getting this introduction to the world of journalism. Now, I know we're almost at the end of the program, so I always hated speakers who went on and on knowing they were the last thing on the schedule. So I'm not going to try not to do that. But what I want to talk to you a little bit about today is the world of journalism and how it all affects all of us. Now, for those of you who came to this workshop because you want to be journalists, one of the questions I would ask of you is that, what was the first journalist you ever knew of? Keep that question in your mind. While we think about that, I want to talk to you about something that all of us who are in the world of journalism we're all very concerned about, and that's about journalism ethics. So you can be the best writer, you can be the best producer, you can be the best cameraman, you can be the best photojournalist, but it's your ethics as a journalist that will determine how far you go. So that's what I want to talk to you a little bit about today, but I'm going to talk about it in a sort of sideways kind of way, because in addition to being a journalist, I've also been a huge comic book fan my entire life. I've been a journalist now for almost 35 years, starting out at a small newspaper in Mississippi called the South Reporter of Holly Springs, Mississippi. And I worked my way up from there. I started at the South Reporter, then I moved to the Oxford Eagle in Oxford, Mississippi. Then I worked for the now closed Birmingham Post-Herald, and went from there to the New York Times and the Associated Press. So just like you, I started out writing about local issues and trying to figure out how to make my way up to where I wanted to be. But in addition to being a journalist, I never gave up being a comic book fan. I've been reading comic books since I was about 5 years old. And remember that question I asked you about earlier about who was that first journalist that you ever remember? We'll get back to that in just a second. I want to show you a quick slideshow. And through this slideshow, we're going to talk about comic books and journalism ethics. And we're going to answer that question I asked earlier. Who was the first journalist you remember running across? So buckle up. We won't take too long with this, but I want to see and talk to you about journalism ethics and comic books. So let me get the screen going here. All right, so I don't know if you can see this yet. There we go. Juliana's already given a great introduction, so I won't even bother to go through my bio again. But let's start with thinking about what are journalism ethics. Ethics in journalism are not a list of do's and don'ts. Ethics in journalism are a series of decisions you make every day as part of the work you do as a journalist. If you're a photographer, you have to make a decision of, should I show this certain image or not? If you're a print journalist, you have to decide whether this is a fair question or whether this is an unfair question. Which word do I use? Illegal immigrant or migrant or undocumented immigrant? What journalism ethics are about is about figuring out how to make the most ethical decision you can make while being a journalist. And that's something I want you to start thinking about now, not just thinking about the questions you want to ask, but the questions you should ask. And also think about the things you shouldn't do. These are all of the questions that we want to think about as journalists. So once again, going back to the slideshow, in addition to, as Juliana said, in addition to being a journalist, I'm also an author. I wrote a couple of books. The first book I ever wrote was the book you see here on screen, which was called Black Men Built the Capitol, Discovering African American History in and around Washington, D.C. Now, some of you may say, well, what is a journalist doing writing a book? Well, you realize that journalism is just history. As a journalist, we're all historians. We just write the history of today instead of history that went on 100, 200 years ago. When I realized that, I started applying some of my journalistic skills to African American history and decided that the first thing I wanted to write about was the contributions of African Americans to the U.S. Capitol. And then I decided to switch it over to the contributions of African Americans to the White House. And that became my second book, which is called The Invisibles, The Untold Story of African American Slaves in the White House. But as I told you earlier, I never gave up being fans of comic books. So my next two books, I went back to my comic book roots and wrote two books about the Black Panther. The first one was called Black Panther, Who is the Black Panther? And the second book, which just came out in March of this year, was an anthology in which I served as an editor and one of the writers, called Black Panther Tales of Wakanda, where a group of Afrocentric writers got together and we all came up with our own Black Panther stories. And we put it together in a book called Tales of Wakanda. So one of the other things I want you to remember immediately is that you don't have to just write journalism. You don't just have to take pictures in journalism. You are developing skills that you can apply to everywhere, not just journalism. You can apply it to literature. You can apply it to public relations. You can apply it to administration. You can apply it to education. In addition to being a journalist and an author, I also teach journalism now, including journalism ethics. So I want you to remember the skills that you're picking up, especially the skills you picked up during this workshop at Savannah State. You can use those skills just about everywhere. So let's go back to that original question I asked. Now, knowing that I'm a comic book fan, when I ask you who was the first journalist you ever came across, I would bet for most of you, you're thinking about a Walter Cronkite or Brian Gumbel. You're thinking about all of these famous real-life journalists. But in reality, the first journalists most of us encounter in our lives are Superman and Spider-Man. Because for most of us, we grow up watching cartoons and reading comic books. And the profession that both Superman and Spider-Man practice in their secret identities is journalism. Peter Parker is a photographer at the Daily Bugle in New York. And of course, Superman is Clark Kent, a mild-mannered reporter for a great metropolitan newspaper called The Daily Planet. For most of us, our first exposure to journalism comes from Superman and Spider-Man. But that's not a good thing. That's actually a really bad thing, because Superman and Spider-Man are very unethical journalists. And their examples of journalism are a list of things that we shouldn't do. And we're going to talk a little bit about that as we talk about journalism today. Now, once again, I'm going to assume the majority of you, since they're international icons, know who Superman and Spider-Man are. Superman, a visitor from a faraway planet, strength beyond mortal men, can see through walls, vulnerable to kryptonite, several movies. Spider-Man, high school student named Peter Parker, bitten by a genetically modified spider, puts together a costume and goes out to fight crime because he didn't stop the guy who killed his Uncle Ben. Superman and Spider-Man. I'm going to assume that most of us will know who they are. Once again, they're also, in their secret identities, journalists. Once again, Spider-Man is a photographer for the Daily Bugle. Superman started out as a reporter for the Daily Planet and moves over to television for a while, working for WGBS TV as a host. They both practice journalism. But do they follow the rules that journalists should follow? Well, that brings up the question. What are the rules that journalists should follow? Well, there's an organization called the Society of Professional Journalists. And the Society of Professional Journalists has a list of ethics that they say most journalists, if not all journalists, should follow. This is something that you'll hear more and more about as you move through the worlds of journalism. And I want to talk to you about just a few of them. So here are the main things we teach in journalism ethics. Journalists should never deliberately distort facts or context, including visual information. Journalists should clearly label illustrations and reenactments. Journalists should always balance a suspect's right to a fair trial with the public's right to know. You should consider implications of identifying criminal suspects before they face legal charges. Journalists should avoid conflicts of interest, real or perceived. They should disclose unavoidable conflicts. And of course, journalists should expose unethical conduct in journalism, including within their own organizations. Now, there are tons of other rules, including rules for visual journalists. And we want to talk about this because of Peter Parker. He's a photographer. Photographers should be accurate and comprehensive when in the representation of subjects, and they should resist being manipulated by stage photo opportunities. Now, once again, none of this would matter because, Superman and Spider-Man are both comic books. But they're usually the first representation of journalists that is put in front of children's face. So people grow up saying, hey, yeah, I'm going to be a journalist like Clark Kent. I'm going to be a journalist like Peter Parker. But we should understand the things that Clark Kent and Peter Parker are doing and understand why we shouldn't do this. Because as we know, journalists are usually the first targets of people who don't like journalism. But what they know about what we do comes from fictional subjects. So we have to understand what's being presented as what journalists do and compare it to what we should and should not do. So let's talk about Spider-Man. Once again, Spider-Man is Peter Parker, a high school student who sells photos to the Daily Bugle. What photos does Peter Parker sell? Peter Parker sells photos of Spider-Man. So Peter Parker is selling photos of himself as Spider-Man for money. Obviously, that is a conflict of interest that they just gloss over when they tell Spider-Man stories. How does Spider-Man do this? He normally sets up an automatic camera that takes pictures of himself as he fights supervillains. That one action, he's setting up photos. He's avoiding the obvious conflict of interest that he is the person in the photos, and he's lying to his editors. All things that would get you fired if you were a real journalist. Not only that, they show Peter Parker blatantly recreating scenes and selling them as real photos. So for those of us who grew up watching Spider-Man cartoons, this was our first exposure to what journalism was like. Oh, you can just make it up and sell photos. That is not what real journalism is about. But for the majority of people who grew up watching Spider-Man, oh, Peter Parker always just made up his photos. So real journalists must do that. But that's not what we do. Now, one of the trends that have happened in comic books is that comic books have gotten more realistic. And as comic books got more realistic, they began to address the issue of Peter Parker's journalism ethics. In fact, in one issue, Peter Parker uses Photoshop. You clearly see the Photoshop logo on the computer. Peter Parker uses Photoshop to alter a photo of his boss and then mayor of New York, J. Jonah Jameson, to help his boss. But what happens when J. Jonah Jameson, who is the editor and publisher of a newspaper, finds out that Peter Parker has altered a photo? He did what would have happened in real life. He fired Peter Parker. Because in journalism, we don't fake photos. Our first obligation is to the truth. So Peter Parker is fired from being a photographer and has to leave journalism because he has faked photos. And to this day, in the Spider-Man comic books, Peter Parker is no longer a photographer. Because in journalism, we don't fake photos. So real life has finally been portrayed in Spider-Man comic books. So at least as we go into the future, people who are watching Peter Parker won't think that that's what photographers and journalism is about. Faking photos, ignoring conflicts of interest. But that's just Peter Parker. He was a high school student when he started. He didn't know any better, right? What about this guy? What about Clark Kent? Clark Kent, they were very specific to say Clark Kent is a graduate of the Metropolis School of Journalism, one of the highest and best scoring students in journalism school. But he obviously didn't take any ethics classes during his time in school because, just like Peter Parker, Clark Kent writes stories about Superman and pretends that Superman and Clark Kent are two different people. And that has been part of the Superman mythology from day one. Even before it was the Daily Planet, back when it was the Daily Star, the newspaper actually changed names. The Superman mythos always has been Clark Kent is a mild-mannered reporter working at a major metropolitan newspaper while also operating as Superman, writing stories about himself. Clark Kent is breaking every journalism rule by writing stories about Superman. He is not revealing his relationship between himself and Superman. There's a very clear conflict of interest if you're writing about something you participated in and you don't tell anyone. He is clearly lying to all of his editors, and he's lying and misleading all of his readers. Not only that, he feels obligated to speak for Superman in talking to his editors without telling his editors he is Superman. Once again, Clark Kent is usually the first representation of a print journalist most people know. As a print journalist myself, I would love to tell you that people know the names of Helen DeWar and all of the other great print journalists that are out there right now, David Espo, all of the great writers at the New York Times like Adam Seawer. But no, most people, when you think about reporters, think about Clark Kent. That's the first guy they get to know. And they see him blatantly breaking journalism ethics in every issue. But once again, reality catches up. In the current run of Superman comic books, Clark Kent decides that he no longer wants to be Clark Kent. He is going to reveal his secret identity to the world. He's going to live one life instead of living two. But he doesn't realize the consequences of this, because the very next day he shows up to work, Perry White of the Daily Planet fires him for blatantly violating journalism ethics left and right throughout his entire career. Reality, once again, has caught up. Journalism ethics, once again, have prevailed. So at least moving forward into the future, when people grow up looking at Superman and Spider-Man, they won't get this flawed view of what journalism is about. Now, that's something I want you guys to think about. And by the way, I'm not the first person to notice this. There have been several stories over the years about how Peter Parker and Clark Kent are very unethical journalists, and that you should not be attempting to think that what journalism is about is what's represented in comic books. But I feel like it's worth repeating over and over that the first representation of journalism that most children see come from Superman and Spider-Man. And in the past, they were not the people to learn journalism from. And we're seeing this posted over and over as we try, as journalists, to rehabilitate ourselves in the eyes of the public. Because right now, I think the only people who are disliked more than journalists are like doctors, lawyers, and congressmen. In part because people don't know what we do. And in part because we should be more blatant about what we can and cannot do. Now, I've also been lucky enough to take part of what I've been doing and translate it into comic books. The pictures you see on screen were were from a comic book I did for DC Comics, representing a sort of semi-autobiographical from my life growing up in Mississippi. But even more interesting, DC allowed me to take Superman and write a Superman story based around Superman's journalism. And by the way, you can find that story in Superman Red and Blue, issue number 3, that's out today. So for all of you high school students there who are to participate in this program and who are intending to go into journalism, I want to end by saying I understand that what you thought journalism was and what journalism is may come as a surprise to you. Partly because until you're in this business, you don't know the limitations and the advantages of what we can and cannot do. But I want you to take the time to continue to attend programs like this. And when you decide to go to college, talk to the journalism professors, talk to the journalists, and figure out what journalism is really about, what we can and cannot do, what we should and should not do. And you'll find that this is a very rewarding career where you can be a Superman, where you can be a hero like Spider-Man, but you can do it the right way. Once again, thank you for taking this time to listen to me. I would love to hear any questions from any of you. Dr. Alexander, I am now open for any questions here. And hopefully you enjoyed this quick conversation.
The very first words out of my mouth were going to be, that was outstanding. Thank you so much for coming and joining us today, for speaking to our students. After spending a week with them, I know how much your words resonated with them. I know. A few were very surprised to hear what journalists do and enjoyed it. And we're very proud of them. They did so much work in such a short period of time. And now your conclusion here, chef kiss. Our chat is open if anyone has any questions for Mr. Holland. I will start off with one. Our students had a few prepared for you.
Great.
When did you know you wanted to be a journalist?
Oh, such a good question. So I was lucky enough that I knew early on that I wanted to be a journalist. I knew in high school that I was going to be a journalist. I actually started working for the South Reporter in Holly Springs, Mississippi, when I was in the 9th grade in high school, because now we got to get a little background. I'm from Mississippi, and there were the city schools and the county schools. The city schools got all of the attention. The county schools, which I went to, didn't get any attention. So no one was writing about the sports that my school was participating in, the basketball, baseball, football. So since nobody else was doing it, I said, well, you know what? I'll do it. And I started writing sports stories about the basketball team at H.W. Byers High School. But just like Superman, I ran into a conflict of interest in the 10th grade because I started playing basketball. So I couldn't write about the team I was playing for. So I had to go put that on hiatus for a couple of years. And then I picked up writing other stories about my school in the 11th and 12th grade and decided to major in journalism at the University of Mississippi. So I've been lucky enough that I've known for years what I wanted to do. Now, one of the things I tell everyone today is that understand that you're going to, frankly, have two careers. You're going to have that career you start on that you go to college to do, and then you're going to have that second career, the career that you move into after you've completed your first career. I've now been a journalist for 35 years. I'm now moving into academics. I actually now teach intro to journalism at George Washington University. I just completed my first year of being a full-time journalism professor. This is career number 2 for me. So understand that you now as students need to have a plan A and a plan B. You might want to go to college for journalism. And by the way, Savannah State, great place to go for a journalism career. But you also need to develop a secondary interest, whether that's art, whether that's politics, whether it's education, whether it's literature. These days, everyone who goes to college should come out of college with at least 2 things that you can do, because your careers your lifespan may outlast your career, or you may get to be almost 50 like some people here and decide that it's time to do something new. Luckily for me, when I was in school, I double majored in both journalism and English. So I started my writing career outside of my journalism career at the same time. So now I'm moving over into the more of the writing and instruction phase. Hopefully that made some sense.
It did. Thank you so much. The next question. What do you find most rewarding about your work?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. I don't know if anyone's ever asked me that one. What do I find most rewarding about my work? Well, I will tell you that I have been lucky enough to be one of the people who can tell you that I've always known what I was going to do. I've always been a writer. Now, earlier on in my childhood, you may find some little sketches around where I thought I could draw, but I quickly found out that I wasn't an artist. But I knew I loved the writing. So I've been writing my entire life, and no matter what else it is I do, I will always continue to write because I love taking the written word and building realities around it. One of the things that we talk about a lot in writing is world building. Even if you're a journalist, you have to be able to tell a story. And one of the things that I've always been able to do in my life is I've always been a pretty good storyteller. And I enjoy listening to stories, and I enjoy creating stories. So I find the thing I love the most about writing is being able to create this reality that other people can take the journey on with me. Now, keep in mind that there are so many different kinds of journalism. I talk a lot about print reporting because that's the thing that I do. Everyone enjoys different part of print, the print reporting. Some people enjoy the interviewing part. Some people enjoy the editing part. Some people enjoy the writing part. I've always enjoyed the writing part the most. So I get my most satisfaction from sitting down doing the writing.
All right, thank you. Another question we have here for you. How did you prepare yourself to cover big news stories?
Oh, wow. That's also a really good question. One of the things that I tell both writers and journalists is that you must be an avid reader before you can be any kind of writer. So whenever I get ready to cover anything, whether it's big or small, I try to find out as much information about that thing as possible. So when I arrive to cover it, I don't spend all of my time trying to get background. I can try to find the new thing. And this will immediately date me, but back when I started in journalism, there were these places at newspapers called the morgue, where you had to go and flip through old newspapers to try to find out the information about the thing that you were going to cover. Now you have Google. There is no excuse for any journalist to show up at anything without knowledge about what's been written before. So if you want to be a good reporter, do your research first before you ask a single question. Do your research, do your reading, and that way when you show up, you'll be prepared to find the new thing.
All right, great. And we have one final question for you, and you probably saw this one coming. What is the best piece of advice you can give to our young journalists?
The best piece of advice I can give to any young journalist is that journalism is not an art. Journalism is a skill. It is something that you learn. And how do you learn something? You learn it by practicing. Michael Jordan didn't become the best basketball player naturally. LeBron James didn't become the next best basketball player naturally. They had natural skills, but they still had to practice. If you want to be a good journalist, then you must practice the thing you want to do. If you want to be a photographer, you should be taking thousands of pictures. If you want to be a good writer, you should be writing every day. If you want to be a good TV host, you should already have your podcast and your video podcast up and going, because the way to get better at anything is to practice it and then research it. Spend your time figuring out what other people do and how they do it. Don't just watch them, analyze how they do it. We learn as much by practicing as we do by researching. So if you want to be an excellent journalist, Your job is to observe the people who are doing the thing you want to do and to practice it. And of course, you always have to take classes. It's always easier to have someone who's been there tell you what to do and what mistakes not to make than to try to figure it out on your own. You can figure it out on your own, but I guarantee you it's going to take a lot longer. So practice, research, and read. Those would be my bits of advice to future journalists.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much, Mr. Jesse J Holland, for joining us today for our closing ceremony of the 2021 Tigers Roar Summer Journalism Institute. I am now going to turn it over to Savannah State University's Mr. Terry Manning for closing remarks.
Well, thank you, Tiffany. Thank you very much, Jesse, for that outstanding presentation. I think we share just about every passion you listed, from comic books to journalism. And yeah, I always did think Peter Parker was a rat for setting himself up for the good jobs and good pay by shooting himself. Just to close things out, I don't want to prolong this at all, but I do want to thank the university for providing support for this program and giving us the opportunity to present it. Dr. Trammell, who has been invaluable in terms of pushing us to do it and to do it right. I know that when the opportunity came along, the first two people I thought of, and Dr. Trammell can back me up on this, was Velvet McNeil and Tiffany Alexander. They were our instructors for the program, and I think they've done an outstanding job. And they did one of the toughest things you can do after they had put so much work into the program. They were paying attention about maybe a third, a little bit more than a third of the way through of the program, and decided, you know, we need to twist this up a little bit, change some things around, and let's try to just make it better. And I know sometimes when you're committed to a course of action, it's hard to change in midstream, but that's exactly what they did. I hope our students enjoyed and recognized the opportunities to be more interactive. So I very much want to thank Velvet and Tiffany for what they did, or should I say Mrs. McNeil and Mrs. Alexander for what they did. Want to thank Evelyn Williamson, the administrative assistant, for her support of the program. She did a lot of things behind the scenes and before the program even started that made a world of difference. For those of you who got your bags, you can thank Ms. Williamson for getting your bags out to you. She was very excited to get those things together, and she did a lot of the outreach for some of the contents. To some of our staff on campus here, Kareem McMichael, William Martin, who have helped out with some technical aspects and a lot of things that people don't see, but you get to enjoy the benefits of them. I would like to also recognize faculty who participated in the program, Professor Reginald Franklin, Theo Plothy, and Vicki Brown, who were generous enough to take time out of their summers to come in and talk to our students. We'd like to thank our outside speakers, Wanda Lloyd, Catherine Blake, and Jared Henderson. And, you know, I can't get out of here without saying thank you to the parents who accommodated your students taking time out to come participate with us and to let us get to interact with them. I know it was a real commitment, 3 hours a day in the middle of the day, for those of you on Eastern time, and for those of you in other countries. I think Katerina, bless her heart, she was in the closing down part of the day, but she had to jump on and spend time with us, and that's very much appreciated. I know Caleb, he was behind us an hour, maybe or two, and so he had to get up a little early at times to come participate. We appreciate that. And finally, to our students, our campers, thank you guys for showing enthusiasm by applying and logging in every day. I know there were some technical problems, and I apologize for that. You know, we're learning just like you guys were, but we appreciate your patience and we appreciate your participation. You know, the camp, I think I said it early on, it's only as good as what you are willing to commit to it in terms of effort and joining in. And, you know, I'm happy with the camp. I'm very proud of it. And that comes directly from what you all did. Thank you so much. It was wonderful meeting you. I already know that I'm going to be seeing some of you on TV again, or maybe in a hologram in the future. I don't know what technology we'll have, but there are some faces I'm trying to memorize because I know I'm going to see them again. If you look at some of the work that was produced by our campers, you probably will say some of the same things about those faces. Those young people are very impressive. They did outstanding work, and we're very proud of what they did. So thank you all. Please go enjoy the rest of your summer. But before you do, don't forget to sign back into the WebEx. We do have a couple of little minor things we want to clear up before we let you go. But thank you all for coming this morning. We hope you have enjoyed our presentation, and please enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much.